That I can do.
You are live, sir.
Perfect. Sorry. Excellent. Thank you. Huh? I didn't either. That's fancy.
Started, so get your food, take your seat.
And I have a,
Got it?
this white space.
Okay. Hey, everybody, I want to introduce David Russ with the city of Belton. He is the city of Belton's Raymore, city of Raymore, which I've been saying all day. How did I even go there?
I'll pretend I wasn't offended by that.
Director of Economic Development, accompanied by Jordan Lee, Director of our Economic.
Yeah, you switched us.
I switched
It's
it.
okay. Development services.
Development Services,
And economic.
Economic Development. Let's go. Woo! Yep.
Now that we know we have the right people in the room from the right city.
Yeah, Belton. We're in Raymore. I think.
Well, thank you for the invite. As Tom mentioned, I work with the city just across the street at City Hall, oversee their development services department, which is essentially anything that gets planned or proposed or built or constructed in the city comes through our office. I also have Jordan Lee with us. She's our economic development director and deals mostly with the local businesses of the city for things that they need. So if there's any questions about things that are going on, she's here obviously to answer some of those questions. So just wanted to kind of talk a little bit about some of what our department does and what resources we have for you all as realtors and maybe what resources you all could have for the city. So you guys are working on projects and potential clients that might be looking to move to the city of Raymore or move out of the city of Raymore. So I oversee typically anything that gets planned. So any new subdivision that gets proposed in the city goes through my office. We take those projects through the review and approval process with the city. And then we also oversee the construction of those subdivisions until they're fully constructed and start building homes. Kind of gets passed over to a different division in our department that oversees actual home construction and permitting and things like that. So different aspects of kind of what you all do as professionals definitely focuses a lot in our department. So I'm kind of excited just to share some of the resources that you all might be able to take advantage of as things are going on in the city. The one thing I wanted to start with, I do get calls every now and then from different realtors in the city as they're, reviewing a property or trying to put together information for a client about a property. I wanted to bring up, the city has a lot of mapping platforms online. Usually it's to ask about what's the zoning of the property, what can they do with the property, are there any special assessments on the property or any litany of questions. But primarily the one that I deal with mostly is zoning. And so I wanted to bring this up, and I can follow up with Tom or whoever with a couple links to you all if you wanted to bookmark those on your phone, just so they're easier to find. But within on our website, if you just Google Raymore Maps, it'll bring up this kind of landing page for our GIS division, which is in our department. And it's kind of in an odd location, but if you scroll to the third page under zoning, you open up that map, you can type in any address in the city, any property that you might be listing or trying to list, and it will bring you up to exactly where the property is, and it'll show you based on the zoning of the city what that is. You can also then click the link that's associated with that. It'll take you to a new page within our code, and it'll give you a lot of good information about what can be built, what can be added onto, what the setbacks, what the development requirements are for the specific property. There's a lot of questions that I get about, can I have a copy of the plot plan or the building permit for the home? Those types of things are more on our end, not available to the public through our website, but you can always request those through our office. For most of the homes that were built like after 1980 or so, we do have a lot of those records on file. And usually that has some good information that your clients might be asking about or that you guys are curious about as you list a home. And so again, I'll follow up with a couple links so that you guys can keep some of these handy in your kind of in your files as you're going through things. But there's a number of different maps up here that you can pull up. So this one lists kind of what all the different neighborhoods are in the city. So even things that you can send to your clients after you've sold them their home and they've moved in, things that might help them learn Raymore a little bit more. We have a park map that shows where all the parks are at and what amenities are at each park. There's if they want to know who their city council representative is and how to get in contact with them. If they want to figure out what utilities are close to their property if they're trying to do a project at their house. They want to know what snow zone they're in for when it snows in the future. Just a litany of different resources that are made available to the public through our department for their consumption and use. And I was going to pull this one up. I wanted to share it because I think I've talked about it before. I get a lot of calls from realtors asking what's going on next to this subdivision or what's going to be built over here or over there. So this is a map that we historically have had and kept updated. Any project that gets proposed that goes through the public review process gets added to this map. It is kind of to the point where it's not really supported anymore by basically our vendor of our mapping. It's a very outdated version. And so we have kind of stopped updating it with any new projects this year. Still has a lot of current projects on there, but we're still working on how we're going to take this information and recreate it into a more up-to-date version. But this is really useful for, you can see, if the city's planning a new sewer project right in front of the house that you might be selling, that might be something you want to impart to your clients. Any park projects that we're working on, any private development projects. So this has been a resource that's been super helpful over time, but it's kind of outgrown its usefulness in terms of the technology that we use. And so we'll be working on that this year to kind of recreate it and make it a little bit newer and function a little bit better. Like I said, still accessible on our website by the first link that pops up in this map. And if you ever have any questions about what is or what is not on the map, you can always call our office and we'll tell you exactly what's going on near or close by to any homes that you guys are working on. The other thing that is interesting, this is a public map viewer on that same webpage. And I bring this up because the city actually pays annually for our own aerial photography to be taken twice a year. We get one in, I think, May and the other one in September for the leaves being in bloom and then the leaves being off the trees or whatever. And we use this for a lot of our projects for planning purposes, but it's also a very high resolution, very up to date for the most part, a lot better than like a Google Maps or Bing Maps or those things that aren't often updated throughout the year, sometimes for a couple of years. And so you can just kind of zoom to this map that was just uploaded in March, I believe. So fairly recent. But it's just another good resource if they have questions about what's going on around them. This is usually a better map to go to just because it's a little more up to date and easier to see. So again, that is publicly available on our website. You can search the address that you're looking for. We have another map that's related to this that it provides kind of oblique or axonomic kind of angled views from satellite of properties, which is sometimes helpful for they're curious about drainage of the property or things that are a little more technical. Our office can make those maps for you based on this, but that functionality isn't really publicly available. So again, just something that, anytime you can call and reach out if you wanted a aerial map to go with your listing or something like that, we can always provide those for you. But for the most part, you can access that online. This is also really good if you're listing a property. Usually it's pretty up to date in the sense you can see if there's a project that's starting construction or has done any work. We use this a lot to do kind of progress reports on some of our longer term projects, just because you can typically see a lot of work going on with equipment out there at a really high resolution. So really good resource. Nothing wrong with Google Maps or anything like that. They just don't update that imagery as often as some places do. And so I always encourage folks to kind of visit this website and look around and see what you can find. The next thing I wanted to talk about just briefly, and it's kind of why I asked Jordan to come here. I've spoken to a few realtors that like to have like packets of information for each city that they work in. And so I get a lot of calls from realtors asking for information about our parks, development that's going on. What I brought up here, and I brought a few copies, I didn't realize there'd be this many people, so I don't have enough to hand out in person, but is our annual report. And that's something that Jordan has put together for the last years that summarizes for the year prior what projects the city completed. It talks a lot about how many homes we built that year, what the added valuation into our city was in terms of growth. It talks about commercial activity for those of you who might be in the commercial brokerage, and just other really good information about the demographics and about Raymore. And so this would be a good thing, in my opinion, to have for your clients that are moving to Raymore, so they can kind of learn about what's happened in the last year. Most of our projects that go on take usually a year to get done or more anyways. So this information is still really up to date. But it has a lot of information about what new businesses that we welcomed, what new residential communities that we approved and that were constructed. It talks about some of the infrastructure projects that we complete that year through our capital improvement program and our budget that the city takes on every year, new park amenities and expansions and things that we've added to the city. And then kind of the summary is just some of the groups that we work with to get that information. But we did one in 2023 and then 2024. We actually received in 2023 an award for this for the amount of information that we put in it and how it was put together. So we've continued to do that every year in Jordan's office. So I'm sure we'll be starting the work to get all that information together for this year coming up here pretty soon. So just a quick, 4 or 5 pager that could be slipped into your guys's folders or whatever you have for Raymore when you're working out here. In general, the one thing I kind of wanted to touch on, I don't really have a map to go with it, but is just our housing construction activity. Obviously, you guys sell currently built and probably newly built homes. But we have built, I wanted to share, some of you may have seen it in the Kansas City Business Journal, but based on our growth in 2023 and 2024 and the projections of our population growth into this year, for the second year in a row, Raymore was listed as the fastest growing community in the Kansas City metro, and I think in the top 100 or so across the state. And so last year, we saw a considerable amount of new subdivisions being approved and proposed. And then towards the end of last year, we saw a lot of infrastructure going into the ground for the subdivisions to be built. We saw kind of a downturn in new construction there with everything that we dealt with the landfill and some things like that. And some of you may have dealt with the impacts of that. And so we have finally kind of picked back up, and our permit numbers this year are ahead of where they were the last 2 years at this time of year, which is really good to see. But a lot of that is all of the work that went into building the subdivisions. Historically, I know when I first came here, one of the things that we track from a residential standpoint is the number of lots that we have in the city where somebody could come in and pull a permit and start building a home like today. And when I got here, that number was, I think, 1,100. We had a big backlog of subdivisions that were undeveloped, which is kind of good and bad. But to date, I just updating these numbers for the month of May, we are down to, I think, 400, maybe 380 lots. And so we've just developed a lot of homes since I started in 2016. But that number now has kind of stayed historically low in the 300s, 280 marks. Which just means the subdivisions that we're approving are getting built on fairly quickly, and those homes are selling, which is why developers are wanting to build more of them, which is really good to see. And so each month we kind of track in each subdivision, how many permits were issued in that subdivision, how many are left to be issued. So I know sometimes I'll get calls that, hey, my client really wants to live in Silver Lake. Are there any lots that they can build a home on in Silver Lake? And there's not in that subdivision, but in a lot of our older ones, sometimes there is one lot down here that they could look at if they want to be in a specific neighborhood. So, and sometimes those aren't even really listed for sale. So as long as you can get the contact information, sometimes all it takes is a phone call for you guys to reach out and see if it's for sale. So again, just a lot of information that does not get shared publicly, but is publicly available if you know what to ask for and kind of who to ask. So this year, most of our development has been single family. We haven't really approved or built any townhomes or duplexes or apartments yet this year. So the bulk of our growth, I think we've issued 67 permits so far this year since January. So pretty consistent each month with how much we're doing. So yeah, just really steady growth so far this year, which is really good to see. And with some of the subdivisions that we've approved recently, unless things change drastically, I would expect that to be pretty consistent into next year as well.
Are you trying to at all encourage and discourage certain types of housing?
So the one thing I forgot to bring with me, and I can share a link to that as well, would be our, we just adopted our new comprehensive plan. They bring up the right map. Which our last comprehensive plan was adopted in 2009. So, just under 20 years old, which is generally how long those plans are kind of good for. So we started that work in 2020 and went through a lot of different exercises to write this plan. We wrote it in-house and then hired a consultant to help us put it all together. But back to your question, is it kind of sets what the goals are for the city across all things. So transportation, our parks, our infrastructure, our subdivisions, our land use and things like that. So in that, there are some goals over what types of housing the city would like to see. But I brought this map back up because what dictates what can be built is what the city is willing to zone a property for. Or if it's already zoned for that, then that's kind of a different process that we go through to review what's already been approved or what could be approved. But most of those for anything that's not single family, especially right now, because we don't really have any land that is currently zoned for multifamily or non-single family development. So any new proposals really do have to come through the city, first through our office, then through our planning and zoning commission, and then to the city council if they desire to move forward with that. That's kind of the process. We do also keep track of when I review all the permit activity for each month of what got built and what's been completed. We track in our city how many, I think we have 10,000 dwelling units in the city. So we have a breakdown of how many of those are apartments, how many of those are duplexes, how many are fourplexes and single family homes. So we monitor those percentages as we get new projects that come online, or as a project gets finished, we kind of close out the subdivision and kind of clean up our numbers with what got built. But our council has kind of given us some direction on what they would like those percentages to be. The thing I always explain is kind of challenging is that it doesn't take that long for 300 apartment units to get built on a project, but it takes a pretty long time for 300 single family homes to get built. So those percentages can get skewed really quickly and it will take a little while for them to get caught back up. But we have had some pretty recent discussions and kind of ongoing discussions with the council and our planning commission and the city leadership about how we keep those numbers balanced. But good question.
On
Anything else?
one of the previous slides on the apps you were clicking on, what's the development incentives?
On the GIS.
This?
No. on
Oh.
No, the website.
I got too many tabs open. There you go.
Yeah, development.
Right there. So this is a map. The city has a couple different incentive districts that we have used for commercial, industrial, and residential projects. And so these, all of these different polygons on the map are different tools that the city has used for different projects. So for example, this is the Raymore Galleria shopping center there as you come into the city. Each box represents a different area and a different tool that was used to help get that project going, for lack of a better term. So the entirety of the Galleria, which is everything you see in orange, is in a TIF district, which is an incentive tool the city used to help finance all the infrastructure that was built when that project came in. So the sewers, the streets, the stormwater, everything that went into building that project. Basically anything that's not a private improvement, like a building or a parking lot. And so we can talk about TIF is a tool that kind of redirects some of the revenues from the project away from the city and other taxing jurisdictions and gives them to the developer to help offset the cost of that. The yellow boxes are what we've used for Chapter 100, which is another property tax abatement tool that the city's used for our industrial warehouses and a couple of our apartment complexes. The green boxes are what we call a community improvement district or a CID, and that's basically an additional tax that is paid, usually a sales tax, that goes, the city collects that and then we use it to pay back debt that was taken out to help finance the project or pay for things. So this map can be kind of confusing because a lot of these things are typically layered on top of each other, which is kind of what you see here. And all this map kind of gives you is a summary of what the project tool was, the boundary for where it was to be used. And then it also has a link to like the ordinance and the plans that the council would have approved when they reviewed that. So likely not a lot of chance that any of your work would spill over into that unless you are a commercial broker. Sometimes a developer, like with the, I'll use the Galleria here for an example. This retail building is under construction right now. So when they bought that, they wanted to know what benefits they were going to be able to take advantage of as the owner of that property. Some of their infrastructure that they have to build will be paid back by that tool, which is something that, kind of caused them to look at that site because it had the incentive on it. Most of these are kind of nearing the end of their life. They were approved back in the early 2000s. They're usually only good for 23 years. And so over the next probably 6 years or 8 years, you'll see those kind of fall off one by one, which really that just means right now a percentage of the tax revenue is being sent back to the developer. When those expire, all of that tax revenue then comes back to the city and the school district and the fire district, and for the rest of the life of that project. So those are just tools that the city uses to help promote development. One of the things that we struggle with on some of our larger sites that we've identified for growth is that none of them really have any good infrastructure to them. So when you think about all the water lines that have to be extended and the sewer and streets and all of those, so very high likelihood that as these expire, the city will look for, what's the next area that we're going to utilize some of these tools. Like I said, they're in place for about 23 years. So once these ones kind of run their course is when we would start looking for where we want to use those. But the same goes if you do find yourself dealing with a client or somebody who is in one of these, you can always reach out to Jordan or myself or anybody else in our office to get information on what that means.
Another question, when we fill out a listing, there's a box we gotta check, if there's any special assessments.
Mhm.
And I never know where to look. Is there a place that we can look
So-
online?
So that's also not really something we can track publicly right now. The city places special assessments on a property if there are any code issues or violations that the property owner hasn't fixed themselves. We usually give them a time frame of usually about a month for most issues. And if they haven't fixed them, the city will go in and do that work for them. We pay for it, but then we have an agreement with the county that we send that bill to the collector and it's placed onto their tax bill, and that's how we get paid back at the end of the year.
So if a neighborhood is adding sidewalks or repairing sidewalks and there's a short period special assessment tax, is that typically through the HOA? And
So it doesn't really actually in Raymore. I'm not sure how the rest of the cities are that you guys work in, but Raymore right now we take care of all of our sidewalks. We don't really make that a requirement of the resident. So when I say code issues, it's like grass is a big thing. If the city has to send our contractor to cut someone's grass,
Yeah, I
or
bought one of those houses.
yeah, you did, and that had a few special assessments on it too.
That was a lot.
We've had a couple homes that have been abandoned, and so the city has had to pay to board those up, and so the cost of that just gets we pay for it so it gets done. But that was Tom's house, by the way.
My own personal house, yeah.
But those are always really good to check on because once the house is sold, I'm probably revealing the secrets now, but once the house is sold, if it changes ownership and the city hasn't collected the money, we can't collect the money anymore. So we just eat that cost. Most of them are a couple $100s, but we've had some that are $6,000 or $7,000 based on the work that gets done. So at the end of the day, that really is just the taxpayers' money that goes to fix something that was somebody's responsibility. But most realtors and title companies are really good about calling or emailing. The best way to do that is either contact our utility office or our code enforcement department, which is in our department as well. We keep a kind of a running spreadsheet of who's paid and who hasn't paid throughout the year. We usually send those down to the county in September so that they get put on the next tax bill. Anything else? I kind of went through most of my points, but I didn't know if you guys had any specific questions about things that were going on or
You didn't answer this, I already missed it, and this is such a dumb question, because I feel like one of those people that gets on the Facebook group and asks, what's being built behind the blah, 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 but I'm genuinely curious, what's going behind Valvoline? Catty corner.
Oh, so nothing right now. That yeah. It's well, I guess there isn't a Valvoline over here. Are you talking about Firestone? Firestone, okay, yeah. Too many car places. No. So right now, yeah. So it's everything south of where my cursor is right now. This is owned by a developer who they were the ones that developed the rest of the shopping center. They don't own any of this land up here right now. So they're just right now putting in a lot of infrastructure to get ready to do something with this property. It's zoned for commercial, so they have to do something, within that category. But they had to relocate a couple of different water mains, sewer mains, and then they have a big storm detention pond right here. They're fixing, and then we just kind of spoke to them the other day. They do have to come back to the city and kind of provide us with the plan for, they can't just start selling off properties and building new development. We'd love for that because we'd get new development, but that's one of the things that our office looks at is like as you're selling off, 6 to 8 new lots, we have to make sure that those all work together well and that cars can get through them without causing issues. So right now, there's really no approved plans other than the utilities, but I suspect they'll probably move forward with something here in the next couple of months.
So, two things. The mayor called that the Chick-fil-A effect.
Yeah.
Basically, Chick-fil-A's there, the traffic's up, it's a good place to put stuff.
Yeah.
Question, same map right there. So I know it's Belton and Raymore. Is Kentucky gonna get closed south of the new loop?
No.
Is
So
there gonna be a line?
there's a couple things that we're working on kind of as a result, or trying to finish up our work with Chick-fil-A. So with them, the city is under design on a median that will be constructed along this stretch of 58. We've had a lot of accidents of people who try to wait and beat the next person in line. And so we'll be closing this access to prohibit that, and it will force everybody to use the signal, or you can still turn right in or right out when that gets built. There is no plans right now to shut down Kentucky. It is 50% in Raymore and 50% in Belton, so anything that happens has to go through both groups. But obviously their access to Clint Drive is important to them, just like our access here is as well.
I was just talking about, I guess, more or less the intersection.
Up here.
Where all the wrecks happen. No, on 50.
Or on 58, yeah. So that would be the median that we're going to build. And that by design, it'll be a raised median with some landscaping in it, so you physically
Good.
shouldn't be able to drive over it.
It's a-
Yeah.
there's stoplights.
And so with that and Clinton Drive, both those have signals. So that's where we're trying to get people to as they come out of Chick-fil-A. But on your comment on Chick-fil-A, just one thing that maybe it's kind of the complexity that people don't see in some of the stuff that the city does and tries to get done. So the city was excited to approve Chick-fil-A and get their project here to kind of get rid of a very building that had a lot of issues in it. A lot of infrastructure problems there with the sewer there from when that project was built, when it was the Ryans. But so we were inclined to work with Chick-fil-A and get them here to this site, and it has had an impact on who is interested. That was honestly one of the reasons that this developer kind of started putting stuff in the ground, is because people used to want to be like by the TJ Maxx or the Big Lots or whatever, but Chick-fil-A is one of the things, because of all the traffic, that's where people kind of want to be by now. And so we have been working this piece of land right here, which is where the former restaurant sat. You would think that is kind of one piece of land right there, but it's actually 3 different parcels. And so we have been trying really hard to get them on board with either buying or selling or combining some of those lots to make it a bigger piece of property to develop. The city obtained a good amount of right-of-way, which is what's here in this orange, when we built the road, that we just don't need anymore. So the city is willing to give land back that we have to help make it something better and bigger than some of the interest that we've gotten. Because what you see in red is really, minus a little bit, is what this property owner controls. And so there's a good, whole third additional of that lot left that could be something else. So it just takes a lot of conversations of why the city may not want that right now. We want something else. But it's usually to prevent a tiny strip of land that will never ever get developed again and will be just kind of a nuisance to some degree. So that's kind of a piece of what Jordan and I work on when we're having those conversations with companies or builders or developers.
Maybe talk a little bit about the big, with somebody.
She had
Go
a
ahead,
question
go
right back
ahead.
there, yeah.
They're gonna do with the land D going south, there's, the crosses over, East West. And then on the west side of, past Bidway, what are they gonna put in there?
Sorry, I'm gonna get back to a better map that's easier to use. Yeah.
West side.
So this piece right here, this is all part of the Good Ranch, which is the larger master plan subdivision with all the homes there in the Good Ranch. So the Good family, who is the original developer, still owns all of the undeveloped land around it. Right now, it's zoned for future commercial. We've had a lot of conversations on what other things could go there, like professional or medical office or other types of residential uses, maybe in a mix with that. So there's no plans in place right now other than it's going to be something commercial. We have been talking with the Good family about, their next step is to kind of do more of a master plan on their own. The city's put together a few concepts of what we would like to see there. That's one thing, but until the developer and the property owner kind of gets on board with moving forward with that, the city can't really require that they move forward with it. So we've been having meetings with them. They're one of our largest landowners in the city, to kind of get them to make some progress on what they want to do with the rest of that land. But all of that would have to go through the city's, review process and would eventually make its way to, that map that I kind of brought up about what's going to happen. Yeah, so it really is a mix of kind of retail, commercial, professional office, kind of service-based uses, and then more than likely some sort of residential, multifamily,
More dentist office?
and coffee shops
And maybe a
probably.
bank?
Yes.
Maybe a bank, yeah. Yeah.
So this, where this pond is, this is a kind of a regional facility that takes in a lot of the stormwater from the development around it. So kind of the concept the city put together was kind of a mixed use commercial development, similar to like a Summit Woods or a Summit Fair or the Streets West Prior, like they're doing in Lee Summit, with those types of businesses and kind of options, and then kind of backfilling some of this area to the north with some sort of higher density residential. We've, a lot of our plans back in the day had ideas for what we would call like big box retail, like Kohl's or Target or those types of businesses who just really aren't doing that anymore. And so that, that development was nice because it took up a lot of the space that would have been here, but a lot of those buildings are kind of going vacant or those stores are closing. So it kind of forces us to figure out there's only so much retail that the Raymore can really support. So the likelihood that we're going to get 140 acres of retail just is really minimal. So that's why we've been kind of pushing the developer to, you guys need to figure out and do the studies of how much land you guys can support of this use, and then we can figure out how much is left over to do something else with. But that's kind of our vision, is more of a mixed development with shopping, recreation opportunities with some of our trails that would eventually get extended through there, and then probably some sort of higher density housing. Not really. This and probably 4 other of our large undeveloped tracts of land are in our comprehensive plan that I mentioned as like areas of focus and like what the city wants to require before we approve something on there, which that's where we're kind of requiring that they do this master plan or some sort of analysis of, we don't want just another development that might work out and it might not. So we're trying to push them to get a little bit more into the weeds with that.
Site we can kind of keep up to date with that all.
Yeah, and I'll send a link to Tom or to whoever else so you guys, like I said, have it readily accessible. That's helpful.
So if you're heading east on Hubach Hill, and there's all those homes that are being built on, or the neighborhoods that are Summit homes that are gonna be there.
Mhm.
On the left, they've got a little, I don't know what it looks like. I thought it was maybe a park.
There, just
But
on the north side of
Is it a neighborhood that is gonna be also Summit homes?
this little street right there. Yeah.
Here.
Yeah.
So
It's just tiny.
yes.
What?
So these are 3 different subdivisions that we're kind of looking at here. It's hard to tell on this map, but this is Sendera, which is, it's a Summit Homes community. They're putting in a lot of infrastructure at the moment. This is the Prairie, the Good Ranch, a totally different developer. And then this is Saddlebrook. And Saddlebrook is actually, the neighborhood overall is this entire undeveloped piece of land. This is just the first phase that they had constructed. So I think they should be complete with that work in like August or so. After they finish that, the city basically takes over all the infrastructure and then they can start building all the homes. So they are not to that point where they can start building anything, but probably August, September is when they'll be ready for that. But this will, as the subdivision gets built, their next phase has to come from the north because they've exceeded the number of lots they can have with just one access. Kind of technical, but eventually Brook Parkway will be extended all the way down to connect with that. And then the city has a trail system that cuts through Brookside. There's a trailhead right here that we built a couple of years ago. So this trail will then kind of come down through the backside of the development and connect down to Hubach Hill to some of our other trail facilities that are down there. Say that again. Yeah, so they're right now they're just finishing up that first phase, which is that cul-de-sac. Yeah, so that'll be kind of phase by phase over the next probably 5 or 6 years.
So what kind of, what's the price range of those kind of homes there?
I don't really know yet. So a new builder has purchased them, which we're meeting with them, I think, next week. They're new to Raymore in general, so I don't really know a lot about the types of homes that they build. Those lots right there are on the smaller end. They're really comparable to like the Clover and Hive type homes that were being built there on in Eastbrook at Creekmore there. Yeah, so just kind of smaller lot, smaller footprint. And that subdivision is kind of mixed. All the homes that are kind of south of this tree line are more that type, and then everything on the north side is going to be more consistent with what's already in Brookside on the north end.
Is there any reason why that Prairie View subdivision just to the south there has gone so slow?
So the two subdivisions I just mentioned those are, I'll say, traditional developers in the sense that they're putting in the infrastructure, and then 9 times out of 10, they're also the ones that kind of build a lot of the houses. The Otis family who owns Prairie View, they're very selective about who they sell lots and homes to. But they don't build as much at one time like most larger developers do. They just contacted the city 2 weeks ago about this was just phase one of this overall plat. So they've just recently re-engaged with the city on getting the plans approved for the second half of it. So maybe they have interest from a builder who wants to purchase more lots. I don't really know why yet, but they've reached out to figure out how they can get the second phase of that going.
I was a former educator, so it's important to me, but plans for other schools, and are there land spaces for that kind of?
Yeah, so we actually just met last Thursday with the school district. We meet like every other month or every 3 months, depending on when they're available or want to meet. But we usually go through. We have this really long working sheet of all the subdivisions that are under construction, kind of what the timing is, what district or what boundary it's in for each school. They share a lot of information with us about the capacity in each grade section. That helps us as we review a new subdivision. If we know, we reviewed one that would have gone to Timber Creek recently, and that is close to being at capacity for some of their sections. So that usually just factors into our conversation with the developer on, hey, we might need to break, you may not be able to build this subdivision as fast as you would like to. Or in other areas, they have all the capacity in the world, and so there's not that issue. We also dealt with them on a recent project there off of 195th Street where Bridle Ridge is. And part of their concerns there weren't necessarily with capacity, but they wanted kids to be able to cross 195th safely. So we were making the developer build a nice signalized crosswalk there that would get kids from the subdivision across to the school. That project ended up falling through, and so it didn't actually move forward. But we do meet with them every now and then when projects come up. They get a copy of each plan that gets proposed when somebody's trying to do a new subdivision or rezone something. So they're really helpful conversations that we have. Yeah, and I was just talking to our city planner the other day. So something that we require when a subdivision comes in, they have to donate or provide the cash or monetary equivalent of land to the city. That's how we get a lot of our parkland. We have a formula that, based on the number of homes, tells them how many acres they have to accommodate. But like the example in Creekmore, so Creekmore donated land in their development for Creekmore Elementary. Timber Creek was a piece of land that was given there. So those are all conversations that we have for the schools. The school district really has to be the one to kind of initiate, hey, we're going to need land in this case, in which case the city may not ask for a park. We might ask for something else. But yeah, that's the benefit of all those meetings that we have with the school district. So all of this is phase one of the Commerce Center. All 3 buildings now, with the exception of this space, are all full. So this is one business. It's a national wine and spirit distributor. There is an apparel company that works out of this space, and then it's a company that builds mobility equipment for handicapped people. So they moved their office and location here to Raymore. And then this is it's a company called Newly, and you can read about some of those in those annual reports that I shared. But they just decided recently to occupy the remainder of the building. They were in, I think, 600,000 square feet of it for their phase one. And then they just the other day decided they were going to expand and take the rest of that building, which would be, it's 1 million plus square feet. And they have how many employees now?
16.
And I think their goal is to eventually be around 1,200 employees. They are a 24-hour operation.
With the combination of that and the other 2 buildings, what type of employment has that brought to the area then? How many jobs has that created?
I mean, I would
How about you
say
get that
there's
one?
probably give or take 1,400 jobs out of those three buildings.
And then when you guys, it seemed like in 2020, it was obvious that we didn't have enough houses and places for people to live, and we've added a lot of multifamily and apartment buildings since then. Do you have a number of what that looks like? What have we added, in units, in apartments? Do I know that?
I would say between the first apartment project that we built most recently would have been the Lofts, which is there off Fox Ridge. That was 390 units. We had another 300 with the Depot, which is south of Sam's Club. So there's 600 or so. I would say probably 900 to about 1,100, give or take. And talking with those, with the leasing offices there, all of those, with the exception of the Depot, might actually even be there now, where they're considered stabilized, where they have the occupancy that they want to have. So from our perspective, there's like people are moving into those units as they're coming online. So that's always good information to have, that we're not building too much and they're not sitting vacant. But that all kind of goes into what somebody else asked of, like, where's the next apartment complex going to go? Those are kind of conversations that we have with our departments, with other commercial projects that we're working on. But to your point, I know just in talking with some of those employers that some of those employees, a lot of them do commute into Raymore. They live elsewhere, but some of those folks have moved to Raymore. They've chosen to live at either the apartment complex. A couple of them, I'm sure, have bought or rented homes in the city. So it does seem like it's having an impact on the city there with people coming in.
To know at what price points we need to add more of it within the city based on those employees and other future growth that we have.
Yes.
So I have two questions. On Hubach and J Highway, are they considering putting that a circle drive like they did over from Hubach over there to 291?
So we did just get a notice from MoDOT. That's a MoDOT controlled. South of 58 is MoDOT. The city handles everything north on Kurzweil. But we did just get a notice on Friday of last week about a project that MoDOT's planning, which is going to be on J Highway from from 58 to I think 211th. They have like 8 different projects planned. The bulk of it is resurfacing the road. The first improvement, they're going to be putting in a turn lane going southbound onto Lucy Webb, and then they are proposing a roundabout at Hubach and J.
Is it bad?
Yeah. And that's been part of their plans for a while, just with the other 3 or 4 that they've had under construction for a while. Obviously the priority, but I think that was scheduled, like the engineering was scheduled to start in January. They were reaching out to get information from all the cities around about what utilities are in that area and that type of thing. So it will be a roundabout there.
They built those apartments called Ascend, and they're right behind Morning View complex, and they're like right in their backyard, actually. Like really close. And I know that Morning View is connecting Morning View with it's like right out their window is this big, apartment right there. That is what those Ascend, they're just apartments, are they?
They're generally townhomes, so very similar to what's around it, just newer. The units on the outside are what we consider fourplexes based on their construction type. The ones in the middle are actually considered apartments because you have 2 units on the ground floor and 2 units above. So there's kind of 2 or 3 different types of units there. And they have been moving in folks, I think, for the past 3 or 4 weeks now. So most of those are ready to be occupied. There's still a couple that are under construction. They will be. So one thing, because I've heard from a couple residents there in Morning View, they do have to do additional screening here on the back end of this project that they haven't done yet. Typically that's not done until they're ready to occupy the home and be done with it, or the project. So that's one of their little punch list items that they do have to come in and install the trees and things that they're going to be putting in.
Do you have the price point of those apartments or condos or what? Do you know?
I think they were starting at like $900 and up. I don't know for sure. I'd have to look. Okay, maybe they're higher up than that. I know maybe the apartments are they're a little bit smaller, so maybe they're at a cheaper price point. But I think everyone up until I think here maybe has an occupancy permit, so they are actively moving people in. And I know we had talked to the thing about this project is previously it was zoned industrial. It was actually our heaviest industrial zoning district, which could have been a whole number of things that it could have been. So when this project came forward, we actually met with that HOA there and just kind of talked to them to make sure they were in support of it. And most of them, some of them would have preferred obviously just to look at the grass for, the remainder of that. But they were kind of in the impression that like would rather have people living out here than bulldozers being stored here and those types of things. So those are a lot of the discussions that we have when we have those public meetings. Like the average layperson really doesn't understand what zoning means outside of like what they can do. But going through like that could have been a self-storage facility, it could have been a construction, whatever. So just those are the kind of things that we try and have those discussions of like, here's what this really means for you and here's what they're going to do. But yeah, the screening requirement has not yet been met with that. They
So
still
what
on
is
their
that?
list.
Right, and
So-
whose is that?
So this is all, it used to be attached, a piece of the land there that's now the apartment. So it also is zoned industrial. We've had a few conversations about it. There's a lot of potential contamination with the previous uses here. There's some old water tanks on that property that cause a lot of concern for the city. So there has not really been any promising development with it yet, but I know there's a group that's going through some sort of phase 1 environmental study on it right now. I'm not sure what they're wanting to do with it yet, but they reached out probably a month or two ago and just asked about it. So that will either, they'll either try and propose something that is zoned industrial, or they'll want to rezone it to some other district with some other plan. But regardless, that would be something we would put that information out there if we did get the application.
Has there been talk, or will there be a thought of maybe putting some kind of indoor play thing for kids, like maybe something maybe for all ages, but I've seen it asked on a lot of Facebook groups here recently, mainly I think probably the Belton one, but Raymore, but people are really wanting some sort of indoor park for their kids. Has there been any discussion on something like that?
I would say not necessarily something that the city would be building. That would be, as Jordan or I are talking to developers on some of those larger pieces of land, those are things that we try and like, hey, we'd like to see this, or we could get behind your project if you tried really hard to bring this to the city. Our Parks Department builds a lot of outdoor play opportunities, and they've focused a lot on, inclusivity and in all ages and those concepts. But obviously, people do want places that are indoors. And yeah, I don't know that the city will ever necessarily build like an indoor aquatic center, which is what a lot of cities have around us. But more of like a recreational play facility. That would be something that, Jordan and I would be responsible for trying to get that interest here. I think it's something that's needed. I have a kid now, so he gets bored easily. And so, yeah, there's only so many things you can do to keep him busy until you got to take him somewhere. But yeah, like I said, that'd be more on Jordan and I to start encouraging that type of thing. On where? So the city just, as you all know, rebuilt Ward Road. The interesting thing the interesting thing about that development is that, get that one more. The road is the only thing that's in the city limits. Everything else is in the county. I do know that the property owner that has the bulk of this farmland on the east side, yeah, so they've subdivided that into, I think, 5 or 10 acre tracts, kind of estate lots. And so I've spoken to the owner, and I think maybe the listing agent with some questions there. Outside of that, I mean, the city would love for more of a traditional neighborhood to be built there, because we have a lot of sewer capacity there to be kind of taken advantage of. So typically when you build those large lots, they come in on like septic. And so there's a lot of wasted capacity there if that happens, but that's all in the county. So I'm not really sure what beyond those 5 acre lots is planned for that. There's Alexander Creek, which I think they're nearing their last couple of lots that they have to build on. There's another phase that eventually they might look to do back here as part of that, but there's really not any new or like future development necessarily. Yeah.
Yeah, I know they just put this up.
Yeah.
Knoll Creek, phase 2, we got phase 3 yet?
So phase 2 is currently under construction. We've issued, I think, 6 permits in there this year, so a little bit slower. I have not heard from them whether they're going to move forward with the phase 2 yet or not. That'll basically involve this street getting looped around, and I think they have maybe two cul-de-sacs off of that as well. So no word on how far that will go. at some point, the cities, right now they created this cul-de-sac. I mentioned earlier about a project that's exceeded the number of lots for one entrance. That's something our fire district has gotten a little more serious about, I guess, in the fire code, is that just for access and fire safety. So at some point, the city is going to have to require that this road be connected, mostly for Alexander Creek, because there's only one entrance in and off of Ward. So it's actually the same developer that is working on both of those projects for the most part. So that's been a conversation we've had about when the city will require that connection and what they can do up until that point.
Question, a little Facebook group and pretty extensive, but I think the synopsis is just, do we have any information on the proposed development at Prairie Lane? Like with land inspired homes was supposed to develop, talking about put elementary in there. Any excited about it?
Not anything that I would be aware of. I know there's land there. Well, I'm thinking Kurzweil and 155th. Yeah, that actually might be in the Lee Summit area. Our boundaries don't go up to 155th quite in that area. That's in our future, like where we would like to annex and grow to, but I'm not aware of any projects that have been proposed there.
Widening Prairie Lane can be conformed to some of Raymore zip code, Cass County, right back. So
Yeah.
I'm not sure if anyone, I guess.
So
It's like 500 words.
that would probably be, that's going to be a project that Lee Summit would be overseeing. It just happens to be in our zip code. And
Stuff on things that they're playing right on borders.
sometimes, not always. The county is really good about that. They'll always send us the notices that they send out, and they give us an opportunity to, most times something that gets built in the county, if it's in a certain area, it's going to be part of the city at someday. So the county always checks and makes sure, is this generally in conformance with what the city could support here in the future? Not every city. Belton's really good about it on areas that butt up to us. I don't often hear from Lee Summit a lot. So that's, like I said, I wasn't aware of that project. But yeah, they could usually, Lee Summit has a really good public portal. So if they just search Lee Summit development activity, they can find that similar map, and Lee Summit has all of their information online.
On 58, near Scooters, they have Einstein Maple that's going in. Are there any other new restaurants or anything for Raymore?
Not yet. They've been going back and forth with a couple of tenants. There's really not anything that Jordan and I can share right now. Einstein Brothers should be open by end of June, maybe mid-July. I think we've heard that they're training employees right now somewhere. And then right now, the only other tenant in that building is the owner, which is Pacific Dental, so another dentist office. But they do have 2 to 3 other tenant spaces that are vacant right now that they can lease all of it to one person, or they can subdivide it into multiple spaces. So hopefully we'll know more seriously about that in the next couple of weeks. But that project should be done, like I said, by end of June, mid-July, I hope. Yeah. Did you have a question? Not that I'm specifically aware of. I know the model that I've kind of heard the school district is going for is the campus type setting, kind of similar to what they have in Peculiar. So I don't know if it'll be a high school or like a new, I know they just built the 9th grade center there out east, but I'm not really sure what their overall plan looks like for new facilities.
I'm
Anything else?
impressed how much you remember about there's so much going on. You haven't softball, nothing. I'm impressed.
Thank you.
That's all.
Thank you.
The very first time I had come down here to the site, and you were very open and let me just come in and start talking to you.
You can ask Jordan. They think I talk too much inside City Hall, and I'll do this like all day long because I just like talking about things that are going on. And absolutely. And thanks for your interest in having us here today. It's like I said, there's a lot of stuff that we do that probably would be beneficial to you at least once in your real estate career. So don't ever feel like you're bugging us by calling us. I'll either call you back or I won't, but usually I will. So just reach out anytime if there's any tools or resources that you guys are looking for.
Raymore riding. 2 years ago, I live in Middlewood. My best friend had a broken leg and all kinds of stuff. They called the ambulance and that was the worst ride. It was just like hitting all the potholes. Tell me, when they're gonna make ambulances for people that are ill.
So the interesting thing about Raymore compared to, again, other cities that you all probably work in is that the fire district is actually not part of the city at all. And like in Lee Summit, their fire district in most cities, it's part of the city. The fire district is its own separate board. And I know they do, I mean, they spend a lot of resources on their equipment. I don't really know the details about the ambulances necessarily, but we do meet mostly with the fire marshal, a lot of our projects, but I can certainly try and put you in contact with the right person. Hopefully you don't ever end up in the ambulance again, but.
We now not own the fire department in our city.
So they, like I said, they historically have operated as their own separate board and they have their own service territory that is most of, actually all of Raymore, but also areas outside of Raymore. So Lake Winnebago, I think part of like West Peculiar maybe. So it is very unique for sure. There's not a lot of cities that are like that. It's mostly in like rural parts of the country or whatever, but it doesn't really create any problems for the city. It's just a different process that people aren't used to when they come to the city and try and build stuff.
Raymore was rural not long ago.
Yeah. Exactly. So, and they've continued to grow. You know, they built a new fire station there in Lake Winnebago. They recently expanded their administrative center here in Raymore. So like as we're growing, just like the school district, like they have to grow. And, you know, we've worked with them on what equipment they have to buy now for like the warehouses that we have. There's some special pieces of equipment that they want to have for the stuff that's being distributed in there that wouldn't ordinarily be found in a house or a commercial building. So again, those are all the conversations we have with as a tenants going into those warehouses. That fire marshal asks all the questions that they need to ask so they have all the right equipment when something goes on there.
Thank you, David, Jordan, thank you for coming. Thank you. Thank you again, Texas Roadhouse. You're not here to hear the thank yous, but everybody kind of keep them. Let's support people that support us. So next time you go out to eat, Texas Roadhouse is always good. But that's in Belton, right?
Yeah.
Well, I work for Belton according to you, so you can go there too.
You guys follow the Olive Garden thing, right? You look. Never mind.
We have a small business Italian instead of a chain.
It is, and actually.
Go visit Lanana.
Actually, I'm a fan of the Olive Garden, so I don't really. So, lots of useful information on the city's website, right? Did we all get that? So that'll be great for us. Also found out that David likes to talk to real estate agents, so give him a call anytime they go on. And that's it. Yeah, thanks.
I'll speak to that.
Yeah.
I've bugged him a few times in the last couple of months, and the response is usually very fast, very thorough. All the info I needed, email, phone call, whatever.
Usually if I don't get you guys the information right, then it causes a problem for us after you've like sold the house and they're like, well, the realtor said I could do this. And so usually it's a big help when you guys do mention. So.
Thank you guys. Stay back there for you guys.
Awesome.
Go. Solid.
I'll leave these just in
Yeah.
case they want to take them, but
Yeah,
I can,
we have a little break.
I'll send you the link to the virtual copies so you guys can see those too.
They were all talking back there when we were talking about the tank farm.
I can take that.
Yeah.
So what?
So it used to be back in the day.
But not a long time ago, Bush Industrial.
Yeah.
That was my dad.
Are you the, oh, okay, so you're not the owner of that farm. I was gonna say, they're actually hard to get hold of.
He bought it from the Bobby and Tank.
Yes, yeah. So it used to be a boys group home. So there's currently a house on there that's pretty dilapidated. And then, really? No kidding. Oh, that's really interesting. Yeah, okay. So, and I don't think they're there anymore, but the person that reached out, they had a letter that they had gotten from the EPA, and this dates back to probably around the time that maybe your dad was doing stuff like that. And primarily their question was basically, we found record of there being holding tanks here. We don't know if they're still there or not, but if they are, you know, confirmation that the city won't allow them to be used, basically is what it was. And then they brought up whatever records that they have, which is why they're doing that phase one study, is there was some concerns about like what has been dumped on the property over time. There's a couple, like, not industrial buildings, but what they were kind of explaining, like maybe a paint booth or something that over time was used as that. I don't have a lot of history on it because it's been here way longer than I've known about Raymore. But really?
Because my mom, my daughter's passed away a couple of years ago, and all of them see through their stuff because I got.
If you had any records, I mean, I would be interested just because, I mean, it's a very developable piece of property. It's just, it has some hurdles that other properties don't because of the structures that are beneath. Yeah, and it's in a trust now, and they're just, most trusts are hard to get hold of, but, like, I don't know, that we've had some mowing complaints there, there's been some dumping we've dealt with. It's just one of those kind of attractive nuisances. People go back there to explore and house problems, so that's the thing that we're. Yeah.
Both houses still there?
I don't think both of them are. There's still one. It's kind of an L-shaped little home.
It's a big thing.
Maybe it's that one then.
There was yeah, I'll have to buy it.
Yeah.
So now I got all that stuff in storage.
Yeah.
Storage unit, 'cause I had to buy it.
The good ones.
So they owned all of Pine Street. They built all that. They developed.
I knew there was Bush Industrial Park. So what was is your last name Bush or? Okay.
Yeah, but yeah, it made it sound.
Interesting.
So, yeah, they started. I don't know, they did my release part.
Okay.
No, they were.
Probably that area, the rest of the city.
They built, they built nice center, all the rebuilt.
Okay.
And so they finally got there.
Yeah.
I still.
Interesting. We're trying,
That was my.
yeah, where the law office is at. Yeah, that's,
That was.
there's some really unique buildings from way back in the day. Yeah, we've been trying really hard with Pine Street Center really in particular to get, a new owner bought it here a couple of years ago. And yes, and so whoever, it was the person who bought it from him or from that family. Glenn, I think, so that's who I did. But we've been trying to have conversations with them about like fixing that up a little bit because I don't know, there's a lot of good local businesses there and you don't want to see them pushed out, but we could also use a little bit of a.
I wish you still owned it too. I'm Rusty.
Hey.
We've met a long time ago, at Chamber stuff,
Okay.
for Apex.
Yeah,
For
okay.
Apex.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
That was, did you just come on this about how long have you been?
I've been here since 2016.
Okay, so you've been there. It was me that just came on new.
All right.
Anyways, I need to get more involved with the Chamber.
I can
Growing.
Yeah.
Stop it.
Like I said, I've seen your guys' name around.
Yeah.